Greetings everyone, my name is Seblewongel. I am working as the Social and Gender Specialist at the Green Climate Fund. I'm happy to be here, and I would like to thank the organizers of the Gender Summit 2020 for giving us the opportunity to present the GCF policy and say something about its implementation. I have a short 15-minute given, and I will try to wrap up within that time. Okay, so the GCF tries to promote the paradigm shift towards low emission and climate resilient development pathways by providing support to developing countries to limit or reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and also to adapt to the impact of climate change, taking into account the needs of those developing countries, particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. While it addresses or promotes the paradigm shift toward low emission and climate resilient development, it also wants to make sure that gender is mainstreamed and the approach that we use is gender sensitive. I would just say a little bit about the gender policy and the gender action plan that has been adopted by the fund. As you would know, or you might know, the governing instrument promotes gender mainstreaming or gender sensitive approaches in all of our interventions, be it mitigation or adaptation, be it with the public sector or the private sector. So across all our interventions, we would like to promote a gender sensitive approach and try to mainstream gender. Even though that is outward looking, inward looking, if we talk about that, then we would like to make sure also our internal practices are gender sensitive as well. One of the things would be to keep a gender balance within the organization. So this policy, the gender policy, was adopted early on in 2015 and then recently updated in 2019. The gender policy is closely aligned to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly the SDG 5, which is on gender equality and women's empowerment, but also it's a theme across all the SDGs. The gender policy has a specific rationale for its existence. One is that it recognizes or considers that gender relations, roles, and responsibilities exercise important influences on women's and men's access and control over decisions, over assets, over resources, over information and knowledge. That is one. It also acknowledges that the impact of climate change can exacerbate existing gender inequalities. I mean, we already know there are gender inequalities, but with climate change coming into the picture or having come into the picture, it aggravates it more. And it recognizes that climate change initiatives are more sustainable and equitable and more likely to achieve their objectives when gender equality and women's empowerment considerations are integrated. This is across the design to implementation of projects, monitoring and evaluation to see whether the objectives have been met. But it also recognizes, even though that there are challenges, it also recognizes that women and vulnerable communities are part of the solution. They're not only facing the challenges, but are part of the solution, and our intervention should look to opportunities that already exist as part of the program. So what does mainstreaming of gender look like at the GCF? We look at accreditation, where partners come to the GCF to be accredited. At that instance, we look to see whether these accredited entities have their competencies in place, capacities in place, and a gender policy already, but aligned to or that complies to the fund's policy. We also make sure that that we have the facilities within the Green Climate Fund to support any gaps that accredited entities might have. This can happen at accreditation, so there is a readiness program that is available to them to use and see if they need any support in building either their capacity, their competency, or develop their policies. So for some, maybe in the private sector, it might not be a policy that is already existing, so we provide that for this facility to help them develop those. Once a project has been, or once they have gone into the stage of developing a funding proposal, then we also provide some sort of financing if they need it to be able to build the gender assessments and action plans, which is a requirement for the fund. We also look into our results monitoring frameworks, where we try to see that there is accountability for gender and climate change results and impacts. So we try to monitor those. We look across not only funding proposals, but any other financing options, like the National Adaptation Plan, which is getting some sort of financing and developing the national adaptation plans, and that's where also we provide support for them to develop the gender elements to it. But as I said earlier, we work through accredited entities when we don't, as a secretariat, directly implement projects. So we do receive annual performance reports from our accredited entities, and in that report we also look at or expect the accredited entities to report against the gender action plans that they would have submitted to us when the funding proposal had been approved. But this is in terms of the projects and different financing mechanisms, but we also look at policies and country strategies, entity work programs, to make sure when they come to the fund they look at gender, or when we support them that they have given enough consideration to addressing gender issues as they develop those. So I'll just give you a little bit information about, because the fund has overall supported to date more than 100 projects, and our early views of where the financing on gender would focus, within the broader scheme of the funding proposal. Access to information, we constantly see through the gender assessments that are submitted with the funding proposals that access to information, particularly on weather and climate information, grievance mechanisms that are set, and also on gender equality itself, what it means within a context, within a sector, is not clear. So access to information both to women and men, but particularly focusing on the findings of the gender assessment, is provided. There's a lot of issues around access to inputs and services, be it in agriculture, be it in technology. There are issues around access to services and inputs to women and some vulnerable groups, and so most of our projects, which if they're focused on agriculture and technology, would look at that. You will see that some of them are geared towards addressing the practical needs, like improved stoves and heaters. And then you will see some others which are, in energy efficient buildings, where some of the projects will focus on particularly more vulnerable communities, like female heads of households, or green energy, or affordable grid connected electricity, micro solar irrigation and solar pumps. With irrigation and solar pumps, most of the assessments that we have looked at indicate that women have less access, even though they are into agricultural activities. So some of our projects will try to look at how they can address those access issues. We also look at access to markets and business opportunities, and many of our projects provide that kind of support overall, but they will have a specific look at how they would engage women-led businesses how to help them grow and engage in technologies and other kinds of services, but also look at how they can get access to markets to deliver their goods. When we talk about businesses and markets and inputs and access, we also talk about finance as the major challenge seen through the assessments. But linked to finance, there are collateral interest rates related issues, so we try to do those. We try to address those. Decision-making positions for women, again, are much harder to come by, so our projects will focus on those, especially when we have water user associations and cooperatives where we see less women engaged in those areas. So other areas looks at access to infrastructure. We do provide support to retrofitted homes and access to water and electricity. So there will be specific focus on women, and particularly female heads of households, and in many cases, access to jobs and incomes. There are sectors which are not, where you wouldn't see many women in the employment and job sector or the formal sector. So some of our projects focus on providing access to jobs and income related activities, which is linked to development of skills to be able to, get into those jobs and also maintain those jobs as they go along. So there are some areas there are some projects that look at that. But under all of this, you provide training and skills, you provide access to jobs, you provide access to infrastructure and the decision making. But we also try to look at the underlying cause for gender inequality within those communities. And so based on our assessment, the assessments that are provided to us, we encourage the assessments to look at the underlying cause for inequalities, such as norms, gender-based roles and responsibilities, which is in many cases is a challenge for women to engage in the formal sector or fully in the agriculture sector, if you like, where the reproductive roles that are usually left to women seem to see them to have time poverty to engage in any other what you would call lucrative engagements outside of the home. So, and violence against women again is in many places is one of the other challenges. So the projects in all will try to look at this very many elements in addressing the challenges to women, and also look at where women feature in all of this already and try to build on those already existing knowledge and experience and expertise to move them ahead and be part of the project and benefit from the project. So the expectation is at the end of the day, with all of this and many more, which I haven't been able to deal with, but are implied in my illustration earlier, we hope that the Climate Fund would be able to meet its objective of supporting climate change interventions and innovations through a comprehensive gender approach within the institution, as I had discussed earlier, and by its network of partners, the accredited entities and those that work with them. We also hope that we'll be able to meet our objective of promoting climate investment that advances gender equality through climate change mitigation and adaptation actions. As I've said earlier, we address it across, and also we hope that we will be able to minimize social and gender-related, climate-related risks in all climate change action. So I haven't seen any project that had indicated that they don't have gender issues, but the magnitude or the areas might be different, but there are gender and social issues that need to be addressed across all climate change interventions. And then we hope to also, at the end of the day, contribute to reducing the gender gap of climate change exacerbated social, economic, and environmental vulnerabilities and exclusions through the Green Climate Fund investment that mainstreams gender equality issues. That's it for me. Thank you for your time. And if you need to contact me, I'm available at the GCF, and you can also look us at our website. Thank you.